Did you know that lobsters pee out of their faces? And in fact, Canadians eat the most donuts per capita of any country. I guess it goes to show that Canadians really do like their Tim Hortons. Those are just a couple of random thoughts, but did you know that you actually have 6,000 thoughts per day? That's right, 6,000 thoughts per day. Now today I want to have a conversation with you, and we want to look at this idea of changing our mind. And I know what you might be thinking. I don't like anybody trying to change my mind. I have my own thoughts, I have my own opinions. I don't want anybody messing around with my head. But what if we brought God into the equation? What if it was God that was saying, I want to change some things, and maybe sometimes you need to change your mind. Paul writes a letter to the Roman Christians, and he's instructing them how to live, how to worship. What does it mean to look like, to follow after God? And he writes this verse in Romans chapter 12, verse 2, and he says, "Don't copy the behaviors and customs of this world, but allow God to transform you into a new person by changing the way that you think." So let's look at this a little bit. Let's break this down. Don't copy the behaviors and customs of this world. Paul is trying to tell us that there's a lot of things out in the world that we can be chasing. That we can be chasing after fame and money and possessions and want nice things. And none of these are bad of itself. But Paul is trying to say, what kingdom or what world are you trying to follow? Are you trying to follow society's kingdom, society's world? Are you more interested in what God thinks? And there's certain things in our society that we shouldn't be copying. We as believers and Christians and those that follow Jesus, we shouldn't always look exactly like society looks. We should look different. And we need to begin to copy and follow and model after what God is setting for our example. What God wants us to live. That is what we need to be following. And then it says that we need to allow God to transform us into a new person. Friends, I want to tell you that a toy that I grew up playing with was Transformers. And it was amazing what I could do with these Transformers. You could turn them into cars, into trucks, into tanks, into jets. It was amazing, and they took on a whole new identity. And this is what Paul is trying to say, that when we come into a relationship with God, our identity should begin to change. We should begin to want to change and transform into what God wants for our life. See, God has a great life for you. He has great plans for you. But we need to allow God to come and do some inward work so that we can have outward results. And it means that He's going to have to come in and examine us. He's going to have to come in and see some things that don't fit anymore, that shouldn't be there. We need to allow God to transform us into a new person, because when He does that, He only has your best interest at heart. He only has great things for you. He wants to transform you into someone amazing and awesome. God wants you to be the best version of yourself that you can be, and that means that you need to allow God to transform you. And then it says to change the way that you think. It doesn't mean that the way that you're thinking right now is necessarily bad, but sometimes we think about things that are not good for us. And our mind is so precious. It's so and it needs to be realigned with how God thinks. The great theologian Jackie Chan in the movie Karate Kid says, "Your focus needs more focus." We have a hard time sometimes focusing on what God is thinking about, what God thinks about us. And we get distracted because, like I said, we have 6,000 thoughts per day, and not all of those thoughts are good. Not all of those thoughts are beneficial. And so we need to align ourselves with how God thinks and how He thinks about you and what He thinks about you. And I want to tell you that sometimes that we need our minds changed. We need to allow God to go in there and just re-examine it and refocus and recalculate it on what God thinks, where God is going. See the progression, right? First, it starts with we no longer are copying the behaviors and customs of this world. We're chasing after God's kingdom. We're more consumed with what God wants for our life, and then we allow God to transform us. We allow Him to go in and give us a new identity and a new being, and then we allow God to transform the way that we think. And sometimes that means that you need to change your mind. There are some things that you've been taught that are wrong. There are things that come into your head they're evil. There are things that will consume your mind that are not good for you, are damaging to you, cause confusion to you. And so we need to allow God to re-examine our mind, because a lot of the times what comes into our mind will come out our mouth, will come out our heart. And so we need to allow God to change our mind. And I tell you, friends, if you do these things, if you no longer copy the behaviors and customs of the world and follow after God's kingdom, allow God to transform you, allow God to change your mind, you will have purpose. You will have just a transformed life. You will begin to worship God with everything. You won't hold anything back. You will be completely focused on what God wants for you. And those are good things. So I just encourage you and I applaud you that sometimes you need to allow God to change your mind. Hope you have a great day. I'll see you soon.